Welcome to Working with Languages, the podcast for language speakers ready to explore the range of opportunities involving languages. My name is Sonja Kamshoff. I'm a translator turned Google Ads specialist and a lifelong language enthusiast. Join me and my guests as we explore how they embraced languages in their careers and what working with languages looks like in the age of AI. Because finding the right inspiration can help you build or shift your career. My guest today is truly international, with a connection spanning 3 continents: Asia, Europe, and North America. Of Bengali origin, she was born and raised in Italy and is now based in Montreal, Canada. In this episode, she tells us about the quirks of Quebec French, called Quebecois, and how she uses both English and French at her job in finance, a field she discovered and fell in love with in Canada. She also hosts her own podcast, Stories Beyond Borders, where she explores the stories that shape people who live between countries. And she also has her own YouTube channel, where she also answers questions on how to learn languages, pass finance exams, and more. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Working with Languages podcast. My guest today is Urmi Hossain, who is international, to say the least, of Bengali origin, also Italian, now living in Canada, working in finance, but with a clear desire to talk about multicultural and multilingual aspects, specifically for women. But we'll get into that in a moment. So first of all, hello, Urmi.
Hi.
It's lovely to have you here. So as you know, I normally start with a fun question. What is your favorite word or phrase in a language that you speak?
So my favorite phrase is in Italian, and it's ti voglio bene, which doesn't have an actual translation in English. It just means I want good for you. And it's something that I had a really big difficulty. I always had the difficulty expressing ti voglio bene to people when it came to the English language, because here the only way to say that you really appreciate someone is by saying I love you. But in Italian, we have 2 different ways of showing our care and love for someone. If you love someone romantically, you usually say ti amo. But if you love someone, let's say as your sibling or your friends or your family, you usually say ti voglio bene. And back in school, we would say ti voglio bene by saying TVB, which was the abbreviation of it. You would write a note to your high school friend and then say TVB, which was the abbreviation of ti voglio bene. And that's one of my favorite expressions, which unfortunately does not have a literal translation in English.
Oh, that's such a nice phrase. I love it. And I understand what you mean. I often want to say it to someone, but then can't really say I love you in all situations. So it's kind of, I normally just skip it, which is a bit of a shame because it's such a lovely expression in Italian and I use it a lot as well.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So tell us where you're from.
So I'm from Italy. I was born and raised in Italy, and both of my parents are from Bangladesh. I was born in Sicily and moved around a lot during my childhood. I went to the north of Italy after 9 years of living in Palermo. I lived in Pavia for 3 years where I did my high school. Then I went 1 year to the UK where I did also partial high school, and then I came back to Italy. And specifically in Milan, where I have basically finished all of my school before moving to Canada in 2010.
Wow, so you've lived in the south and the north of Italy. You've seen a lot of the country, haven't you?
I did.
Whereabout did you go to the UK when you were at school?
I was living in this place near Northampton called Wellingborough. I don't know if you're familiar with this city. I lived there for a year, and over there I learned English basically.
That's so cool to go. Did you go for a full year?
I did, and then we came back to Italy.
So I find it also really interesting that you did the same type of school in Italy that I did. So it's kind of a technical commercial secondary school, but with a strong focus on languages. Which languages did you study at school?
I studied English, French, and Germany, not Germany, German. And I did quite intensive classes. Like we had really intensive hours, like especially of English, French, and German. We also had like teachers who came directly, who were mother tongue French speakers and German speakers, and we would have like conversation just in English, just in French, and just in German. And I also did like certification in each of the languages. And I like this is how I learned English properly, and the same thing with French. However, German, I actually lost it along the way because it's not something that I was using too often. And we learned German because Milan is not far from other countries where German was spoken, but I actually never got to use this. I only like I did it for 3 years. I knew how to speak it. I knew how to have a conversation with people. But then as soon as school was over, I just forgot about it.
Yeah, you need to use the languages. Otherwise, over the long term, you tend to forget them. So when you finished your secondary school, did you have an idea of what you wanted to do professionally or with your life altogether?
Yeah, there were so many things that I had in mind. I initially, especially with the program that I was doing, I was like, oh, I'm going to eventually become a tourist guide. I'm going to go around and talk English to people and French to people and talk about the history of Italy and all the different, monuments and art that we have as a country to show to the different tourists. And at some point, I also thought of becoming a therapist because I was so much into psychology and like solving people's problems. However, I knew that that wasn't my future, like neither becoming a tourist guide or becoming a therapist, like it was not going to be my future. And if I was living in Italy, I knew that I wanted to continue with the languages, but at the same time, I was like, I'm not sure where I'm going with this. Like, I'm not sure what path to take. And then, of course, I moved to Canada and I took a completely different path, I would say.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So you moved to Canada, I think, at 19, is that right?
Yeah, yeah, I was quite young, yeah.
And how was, the move? Because it's a very, first of all, it's geographically far away. So, you may miss your family or your friends, but how was the cultural connection to this new country to you?
I would say that it was quite an exploration and quite an adventure when I moved to Canada because there was only little that I knew. Like I live in Montreal, which is in the province of Quebec, and I remember I learned the word Quebec when I took a French class back in Italy, and I was like, oh, I don't know what Quebec is. Like it must be somewhere out, like in the world. And before you know it, I'm like living in the province of Quebec, which is so funny. And when I when I moved to Montreal, it was very interesting to see the dynamic with the languages. Like here, it's a bilingual city, so you speak both English and French, and everyone approaches you with the two languages. So they usually say bonjour, hi. So and then it's up to the person like responding to choose in which language they want to be served. So if let's say they say bonjour, hi, and then you start speaking in English, then they will continue the conversation in English. But then if you respond in French, then they continue speaking in French. So that was a quite interesting dynamic because everywhere is bilingual basically. So that was something that I really had to adjust. And people switch really easily from one language to another. And sometimes we have what we call I think it's called Franglish or something like that, which is a combination of both languages. So people like maybe speak in English and then they throw some French words or vice versa, which is quite interesting.
I remember you saying that French in Canada, maybe specifically in Quebec and Montreal, it's different. It's a very specific kind of French. Is that true? Can you give us some examples?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very true because back in Italy, like especially in Europe, the French that they teach you is the one from France, predominantly the one from France. But then in Quebec, what we speak is called Quebecois, which is also French, but it's French from the Quebec area. So there are like different expression, it's a different accent, a different pronunciation. And so sometimes it's almost feel like they're speaking a different language, like they eat the words maybe to say certain things, there's like they use maybe some English words or they make the French word in English. So it's very interesting in that sense. And I had a little bit of like difficulty at the beginning because people would speak to me in Quebecois and I would really not understand, even though I knew how to speak French and everything, but it was quite a challenge for me. So I really had to work on like my listening skills. I had to work on the pronunciation. I would say my main work was more with the listening part because they would speak quite fast. Sometimes I felt like it was rough. Whereas I feel like with the French from France, it's a little bit more, I would say, elegant when it comes to like speaking, where the French from Quebec is a bit more rough, I would say. And so that was the difficult part. I really had to work on that. And Quebecois is not always it almost feels like you're learning a different language.
Really interesting. So did you learn Quebecois in your everyday life, or did you take some courses? Did you have someone helping you?
No, basically what I did, it was more a work that I did on my own. So I knew how to like work because I had the base, right? I had the grammar, like the French grammar is the same everywhere. So I already had the base. I knew much of it. All I had to do is really like watch videos on YouTube just to work on my, let's say, practicing like the active listening part. Then I had a friend who was from France and I would like speak with him in French just to, make myself fluent when speaking. And I made sure that I was good enough to the point that I can do a job interview. And now I actually work in a French environment. So I deal with French Quebecois individuals. And that was my end goal that I did, because the problem was that I didn't want to lose French the same way that I lost German. And so I was like, no, I have to make sure that I like work really hard. So I took some courses, but it wasn't like going over the grammar, going over like words or stuff like that. It was just to have a conversation and make sure that I was fluent enough and to have a conversation, and also to make sure that I was understanding when the other person was speaking to me.
Yeah, yeah. And you also went to university in Canada. Were there classes in English or in French or a mix?
No, no. In Montreal, you have universities which are just only in English or just in French. We don't have like both. High school and elementary is a little bit different, but in when it comes to universities, you get to choose depending on your program. And some universities are just strictly in English, some are just strictly in French. I have studied in English, and I did a bachelor degree in finance, which was just in English.
Great. How did you find it studying a subject like finance in English when before you studied in Italian?
You know what? I did not find it difficult at all. I think that because of the way that I was taught English back in high school, like I had a teacher who was really tough with us. And so she made sure that we mastered English as we were native speakers. So when I came to Montreal and I was studying in English, it was totally fine for me. Like it was normal, like as if I was going to school to Italy. So I did not have that challenge when it came to learning new words or so forth. And if I did, I would like just Google them and try to understand the definition. But it was quite easy, I would say. Like for me, there was never a challenge when it came to that. But it was interesting for me to see the way everything's changed in my life, because my whole life I studied in Italian. I come to Montreal and I studied English, and then now I work in French. So that's the interesting dynamic that I'm always reflecting upon when it comes to like my journey with languages.
Yeah, interesting. And now you work in finance. Tell us more about it.
Yeah, I work in finance. It's been 10 years that I'm in the industry, and I always like to say I'm a proud woman in finance. I very much enjoy my job, and I enjoyed my university journey. I always say my experience with finance was like love at first sight. I did not do finance back when I was in Italy. I actually learned about finance when I came to Montreal, even though when I came to Montreal, initially I was like more opting towards international business, because I was like, oh, I know languages and this is how I can use it by doing business internationally. But I knew that there was no future. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to switch into something else and try finance. And the moment I took the first finance course, I just fell in love with it. And it's a love that has always been there. So I very much enjoy being in finance. And it's very dynamic, which I feel like it just matches with my personality, which is very dynamic as well.
It's the first time I hear someone say finance and dynamic in the same sentence.
There you go.
How do you find it also as as a woman in the industry? As I know you're now Canadian, but originally you were from a different country. How do you find it? Is it easy, or are there any challenges for you?
I mean, I would say the challenge for me, I would say for me, in a way, I was lucky enough that I have done my university here and I got my degree in Montreal. And I was able to understand a little bit of the workforce dynamic and how it works. And I can see the difference when it comes to Canada and Italy. Like in Canada, it's very competitive, the market. Like everyone is doing something. Like we finish all our degrees, but then we move on and do like a certification, a master, or something extra. And there's always like demand for that. Like people are always trying to invest in themselves, which is something that I did not see back in Italy. Like I feel like you just get a high school degree in Italy and that's it. Who cares about the rest? And here I can see also the dynamic in the workforce. Like let's say like you go for an interview and depending on the role that you're applying for, typically it's your interview will be in two languages. Like maybe a few questions will be in English and then they will move on and ask you some questions in French because they want to test both languages. And if you're facing, if you're client facing, that they want to make sure that you know French well because it's more prevalent compared to English. And so I had to like really navigate that kind of dynamic. And also there's so much competition and people hop from one job to another really easily. Like in Italy, we say that if you find one job, you stay until you retire. But in Canada, it's different. Like you easily change job after 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. Like you're always changing to find something better, to get a better salary, and so forth. So it's quite normal that you are always moving around and not sticking to one place until the end. So that was something that I had to like, I observed that, I learned that a little bit how people were doing it. And I had to learn to like always invest in myself and invest in my knowledge and getting new skills, getting new certifications. And of course, finance is it's a challenging industry, meaning that it's very male dominated, but things are also shifting and changing. I think with the new generation, we have a lot more women stepping up and getting degrees in finance and also working in finance, but it is predominantly male dominated.
Mm. Do you have any sort of mentor at work who helps you, or maybe at the beginning helped you navigate this different work environment?
I would say that for me, my mentors were different women that came into my life. I had few managers, few coworkers who were not officially my mentor. These were people that I just look up to, who were, I would say, an idealized like I would say an ideal image or an ideal individual of what I wanted to be. So some of my female managers, I always like ask them questions. I also had like officially a mentor. It was a male mentor back in my previous workplace where I would like ask questions and so forth. But I always like I would say that I have a lot of like managers or people that I work with that I see as my mentors. Like, I don't think you necessarily need to have a mentor who's like officially there for you. I think anyone can always give you some guidance and tips and advice when it comes to career or anything in general. But I did have like a lot of connection. That's another thing like that I really worked on was building my connection as soon as I started my career because it was something that I've not done. And I can see the benefits of like having connections in the industry, but also in general, which I feel like it's something that maybe in Italy is not so much emphasized. That's another thing that I noticed. But here you really depend a lot on your connections and having people to refer you for a job and so forth.
And how do you use languages in the work that you do? Are there any situations, for example, you mentioned you work a lot with French and French is the main language, but are there any situations where you work more in English or is everything in French? What's the influence of languages in the work that you do?
It's quite big, I would say, meaning that internally, like internally in the company, everything is bilingual. Like any internal communication, it has to be given both in English and French, with French coming before English. So usually, like if there's an internal communication, if first in French and then there is the translation in English. And at work, you will have, I would say, a good proportion of people who are everyone is pretty much bilingual, but there are people who are more francophone compared to who are more francophone than anglophone. And usually, what happens is that I would say probably like 70% of my time I'm speaking in French, and then maybe 30% I'm speaking in English. Like with my co-workers, I speak in English, but then with my bosses, I speak in French. And with the clients, I speak in French predominantly, I would say. So I would say the ratio is probably like 70-30. And because I'm so used to approaching people in French, French comes to me more natural than English now. As soon as I hear someone saying bonjour, I already go and just speak in French. I'm not like switching in English. And so I'm like, I would say that's the way that I'm using the languages. And there are so many Italians as well in my workplace. So I don't get to use Italian as much because these are people that are born in Montreal whose parents come from Italy, but then they did not learn Italian as much. So I don't get to, like, when I'm speaking with them, they have a little bit of hard time like understanding me because they do not know the language properly. So
Great. Are there any other nationalities in your team or in the company that you work for?
It's quite diverse, I would say. I would say it's very diverse. We have people from all over the world, although I feel like there is a predominance when it comes to Italian. Like I feel like we have a lot of people from Italian origins who are Canadian Italian. So they're born and raised in Canada, whose parents are from Italy.
Can you tell us more about your podcast and your YouTube channel and why you do it?
Yeah. I have a podcast called The Stories Beyond Borders, which is a podcast where we talk about migration stories and we talk about third culture kids. We talk about people who are multicultural, multilingual. And the reason I started is because I wanted to bring awareness about people moving around and why we move. And it's always interesting to hear people's stories. We all move for different reasons. And sometimes it's not obvious. Some people really move for let's say for a reason for work, or some people have no choice. And I wanted to start that podcast for that reason and to make it more like a storytelling, to be able to give people a place to share their stories. And on my YouTube channel, I talk about a lot about public speaking. I also talk about how to learn languages and myself being a big, like I'm so passionate when it comes to learning languages. I'm also into learning Spanish right now. I took a few classes when I was in university, but it's a language of my choice, I would say. Like when I think about, let's say, Italian and Bengali, these were not like languages of my choice. These were given to me. And then English and French, these were languages that I had to learn at school. But then Spanish is the language of my choice. It's something that I have chosen that I deliberately wanted to learn. So that's another thing. Like I'm like constantly learning and continue learning languages. And in my YouTube channel, I also talk about how to pass certain exams when it comes to finance. I'm like giving like tips and tricks, I would say. Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. So it's a really wide topic that you cover, from finance exams to languages and people telling stories of people moving to different countries. And I listen to your podcast. It's really, really good. So what are your plans for the future for your podcast and your YouTube channel?
I definitely want to have these conversations around migration and people moving around. And it's very interesting. Like I feel like every time I'm talking to someone, I'm learning something new. I had a guest who talked about her experience being biracial, that she was half white and half Black. And she talks about her experience a little bit navigating that kind of dynamic and how it was for her. So I feel like I'm always learning something new and I want to keep having these conversations. I had individuals who are constantly moving around and constantly learning languages, which I find always so fascinating, that there are so many people into languages and being polyglot. And I definitely want to keep growing like my YouTube channel and, give more tips and tricks and share more of my own experience. I think it's a way to to really give back to the community, I would say.
It's nice. And also I find it interesting why people want to learn new languages. And sometimes it's because they want to travel, or sometimes it's just merely cultural and linguistic curiosity. Or maybe they have a new person in their family or a friend who speaks a different language and they want to be able to speak in that language with them. And I just find it fascinating, the reason behind learning a language, because then it will also influence how you learn it, and, for example, which vocabulary you go down with? Is it more like traveling and more sort of, let's say, logistics based, or is it more a family member where maybe you talk more about cooking? So that's that's so interesting.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I also feel like the way we learn languages have changed throughout the years. Like I feel like back in my days, it was really like you would learn a language in the classroom. Like we did not have like having internet was a luxury. You did not use YouTube that much. You didn't have all these applications. You did not have all this platform to learn languages. Whereas now it's much easier. Like I feel like learning languages is it's much more accessible and it's much easier, I would say. Like you have podcasts that you can use, you have YouTube channel, you can watch vlogs, you have all these courses that you can take. You have a lot more. Like it's not just at school that you can learn a language. You can also learn language like on your own if you buy a course online. And there's so many teachers out there, so many professors who are like selling courses. I feel like it's so much easier now to learn a language, which is also probably why I feel like I don't know if it's me meeting a lot of people who like learning languages, but I feel like it's more democratized, I would say. So it's just a lot more people are learning languages right now.
Yes, I totally agree. And I find that when I was at school, the emphasis was on grammar, whereas maybe it's about the phase in life that you're in. So if you're, sort of in your 20s or later, you generally just want to speak. So grammar is still important, but it's not the primary thing. You don't start necessarily with grammar. It's about speaking and communicating and getting your message across. And that is a very different way of learning the language.
I just have one message to share, especially when it comes to learning languages, is that sometimes we think that there's certain, like I heard that once you reach a certain age, you cannot learn a language, or you can, but it's much more difficult. But I would say that if you do have a passion for for learning a language, it's never too late. You can start learning a language at 30, at 40, 50, no matter when you want. And I've seen it because I see it with my Spanish classes when I am in a group of with people. There are people from different backgrounds, different ages, and I can see that they are so passionate about learning a language. So my message is it's never too late. You can start anytime when it comes to learning a language.
Brilliant. That's a great message. Thank you so much. And thanks a lot for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
What I find so striking about Urmi's story is just how central languages have been to every step of her life and career. At school, she studied in Italian, got her finance degree in English, and now she spends the majority of her working day in French. It's a good reminder that in many workplaces, especially in multicultural cities like Montreal, the language you show up in isn't just a preference. It shapes how you're perceived, which roles you can access, and how far you can go. For Urmi, investing in her French wasn't just a personal project, it was a professional one. And that's really what this podcast is all about. The very real, practical role that languages play in our working lives, often in a way we don't fully appreciate until we look back. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. And if you think a friend might be interested, do share this episode or the podcast with them. You can also subscribe to my newsletter. The link is in the show notes.